If you've ever tried to create a terrain using native DCC tools, they probably know that those tools aren't very good and it's very difficult to get good looking results. So I've created a tool that's going to eliminate this issue and will allow you to create realistic terrains all inside of your DCC with erosion, mountain ranges, terracing, and a bunch more. And best of all, it is going to be completely free for you to download. The only caveat here is that you do need a Houdini engine license, which comes with Houdini Indie and above. So you will need to pick that up, but it is relatively inexpensive to get Houdini Indie. I believe it's like $250 for 1 year or $400 for 2 years. And if you are already using Houdini to accent your workflows, then you should definitely start because Houdini is extremely powerful. It does take a little bit to learn, but it's going to help you out a lot. So let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what we can do with this. So everything that you're going to see here is created using this tool. So this terrain right here with all the mountain ranges and erosion. Got one over here with some terracing. This one is just a little bit different based off of more mountain ranges. And then I have a third one over here with more mountain ranges. So as you can see, a lot of erosion going on. You can see the striations in the mountain ranges, little different undulations and stuff, along with the undulations in terrain, as well as some erosion going on here and some terracing right here. Terracing is a little bit wonky to work with. It takes a little finagling and may take a little bit of some work afterwards to get it looking good, but you can get some good looking results out of it. So let's go ahead and jump in and show you kind of how this all works. So I'm going to just disable, actually, let's just group all of these. So I can just disable them all at once, and then we'll show this terrain generator. So if you don't know how to do this inside of Cinema 4D, I'm not sure how it works inside of other programs like Maya or I don't know if 3ds Max. I think 3ds Max has Houdini Engine as well. You go up to extensions in Cinema 4D, Houdini Engine, and then load asset, and then it'll bring you in this tool right here. So you can set the size. I just set it to centimeters because if you set it to meters, you can get this clipping, which kind of sucks. You can't really look at your terrain as a whole. So I just set mine to centimeters. And we have all sorts of different settings in here. So by default, the terrain size is 500 by 500. You can change this as we go here. Let's see, go 750. You can go up to 3,000. Go however you want. The higher you do crank that, the longer it is going to take to do everything. So I would recommend keeping it kind of low, and then you can offset the terrain here. So let's say I wanted to make a bigger terrain. You can offset this by 500, and then you'll get an exact line up to the way your terrain was. Just offset it by how much how big your terrain is, and then you should be good. So there is a bunch of different settings in here. It's all dynamic. So as you check certain things like this multi-noise terrain, you'll see we have some more options that pop up and that are hidden when you don't need them. So you can go ahead and play around with all these different things. Amplitude is going to increase your size or decrease the size of the noise, or the amplitude of it, the scale basically. The size is going to do the actual size of the noise. So the higher you crank this, the bigger your noise is going to get. The smaller you crank it, obviously, the smaller it's going to get, and the more it's going to scale up. So it's going to be a lot more noisy and look a lot like it has a lot bigger of an amplitude the lower that you crank that. There's also all sorts of different types of noises that you can use here. I personally like the sparse convolution noise, but that's why I have it set to that as default, but you can use all sorts of different ones. Just adjust your settings accordingly. Set that back to sparse convolution. And then you can change how this scales up. This base height is used mostly when you're using a multi-noise terrain. So this is going to blend two noises together to create your final terrain. So as I crank this base height up, it's going to change where it starts coming through the second noise. So go ahead and leave that at 0.5. You can also, if I go back and disable this, you can change the clipping. So this is going to flatten out parts of your terrain. So as I crank this up, you can see I can cut out the bottom of the noise and create something like a lake would be something that you could use this for. And then just add a noise on top of that, or add some distortion on top of the actual flat part there. Add maybe a normal map and create yourself a nice little lake. If I go ahead and set that back down, where'd it go? You can also cut off the top as well with the clipping maximum. So as I bring this down, it's going to create kind of like a plateauish type of look. Maybe not exactly what you'd want, but it's there if you need it. As well as you do have erosion. So if I click play here, it's going to start to erode the terrain. And that's all based off of these erosion settings. So if I jump back, you will need to reset back to frame 1 in order to view changes. So if I change the amplitude here, you're not going to see anything because I have to go back to frame 1 because it's got to basically recook the asset or redo all the calculations. So the global erosion rate is set to 2 just so it simulates a little bit faster. If you want less erosion, you can bring this down to 1, or if you want it to go faster, so if I crank this up to something like 5, it's going to really erode very quickly. That way you don't have to sim for as long, but it is going to eat away at your terrain a lot more. So just be aware of that. I'll go ahead and reset that back to default. There is an erosion seed here, so this is going to drive the erosion just globally and change the different look based on that seed. There is also settings for hydro erosion and thermal erosion. So this thermal erosion is most kind of affects the most, I would say. So if you look here, so it's eroding pretty decent amount there. I reset this back and then I set this down to something like 0.3. It's going to erode a lot less. See, it's not eroding nearly as much. It gives you some different results there. So the settings back up here, if I actually kind of glossed over this, so smoothness, this is going to affect the overall smoothness of your terrain. So if I go ahead and simulate here, I'll show you kind of what I mean. As the erosion happens, it kind of creates some jagged edges. Should be good right there. So if you see right here, you kind of get some jagged edges in there. Doesn't look too great. So you can crank this up. The higher you go, the more smooth it's going to be. If you have this all the way set to 0, you can see the terrain is very, very jagged. So I have it set to 1 for default. Gives you a nice kind of balance of the details as well as smoothness. Because if you crank this up all the way up to like, let's go with 10, and see it basically erases all of your erosion detail there. And the higher you go, it's just going to completely smooth over all those details. So not something you probably want to crank up super high, but it's there to kind of smooth out some of those kind of jagged edges. So if I go ahead and activate this multi-noise terrain and I bring up the base height here. Oops. Forgot we got to go back to frame 1. Easy to forget that. So you can see it's eating into our terrain here. So I just wanted to give our secondary noise a little bit more prominence here. So if I change these settings, it's going to change how the secondary noise looks. So you can kind of create a much bigger or a much smaller noise, make it a lot more noisy, a lot bumpier, or just play around with it and change the, I did not reset it to default. All right, I think it was like 150. Play around with the offset and offset your noise as well, get some different looks there. You can also change the type of noise that this has. So it'll give you a bunch of different looks there as well. Set that back to sparse convolution. And the roughness, as we crank this up, you'll see that it also affects the overall roughness of your noise. So it's basically going to kind of affect the contrast of the noise that's being applied to the terrain. So if you think about noise as a black and white image, that's basically what's going to be projected onto the terrain and displace it based on the values. So the black values are going to stay at 0, whereas the white values are going to actually create these undulations that you're seeing in the terrain. So the roughness is going to basically act as a contrast. So the higher that you crank this, the brighter the whites get, and the brighter the whites get, basically, the more noise you get. So you can also affect this base height. So this basically does the same as the other base height, just a different setting for it, as well as you do have clipping for this secondary noise as well. So if I go up here and I set this from different to different blend modes, you can either replace the noise, you can add the noise, the secondary noise, on top of your original noise. You can also do subtraction, difference, multiply, all these different settings. Blend does bring up a different setting, so this blend amount is going to blend between the two different noises. So if I set this all the way to 0, you're going to get only the secondary noise, and if I set this all the way to 1, you're going to only get the primary noise. So just be aware of that as well. If you want to get a little bit of blending between the two, it's a good way to do it. And then lastly here we have the terraced terrain. So this is going to create some terracing and bring up some more settings down here as well. I'll just collapse some of these. So if you click this compute range, it's going to compute the range for the entire terrain, and it's going to create your terraces based on that. So as I click that, you can see it looks at the entire terrain, but you probably don't want that. Probably only want to get some terracing on your mountains, things like that. This is where I said the terracing is a little bit wonky. I can create some very kind of jagged, weird looking edges, and it's not exactly perfect, but it does get you some decent results that you can then edit and get your final result as well. So if I change the step size here, this is going to change the amount of terraces, basically. So the higher you go, the more the larger your terraces, I guess, the larger steps there are. The lower you bring this, you're going to get more and more steps in this. So the way the erosion works is it's going to not erode away at the terracing, just because if you have it set to erode after the terracing takes place, then it's going to just eat away all of your terracing and basically just make it all smooth again. So as I simulate here, it is going to slightly change just because the overall noise below the terracing that happens before the terracing, it's changing, so it is changing the terracing just a little bit. But as you can see here, we have some nice erosion in the rest of our terrain here. You can also change the smooth edges. So this setting is going to change how smooth this appears. So if I set this all the way up to 1, it's going to make a lot smoother terraces. Kind of gets rid of those, jagged edges that you get from the height field. If you set this to something super high, you're just kind of going to get a mush. So probably want to set that somewhere like 1, get you a nice balance between the terracing and the smoothness of the terrain as well. And then if you go through and add this or check this setting, this is going to reintroduce noise on top of the terracing. So if I uncheck this, I'm going to go back up to the step size, and I'm going to maybe set this to 20. Yeah, so if you look here, this terrain is where these terraces have taken place. It's basically just flattened out the entire terrain there, which isn't very realistic. That's not really what you want. You still want some undulation in that terrain, Probably not nearly as much as in here, but you probably do still want some undulation. So that's what this reintroduce noise setting is going to do. So as I click this, you can see it just creates some undulation in the terrain and re-adds that noise on top of it. It does add the noise on top of the entire terrain, so just be aware of that. And then you can also resim and get your nice noise or your nice erosion back as well. So it's going to just re-add that noise in and get you some more realistic looking results. So I definitely recommend using that setting. And like the primary and secondary noises, you have all of the same settings that you could use up there as well. So you can change the amplitude, make this something ridiculous and get a really weird looking result, or you can just keep it nice and something just a little bit, add a little bit of detail back in there. And like I said, you can change all the noises as well, get some really interesting looking results if you really wanted to. But that's basically a quick overview of how this all works. If you have any questions on how it works, please feel free to let me know. If there's any things you would like to see added onto this terrain generator, it is going to be called Enhanced Terrain Tools, as you can see here. So this should work inside of pretty much any DCC that has your Houdini engine or has a Houdini engine available for it. It should also work in Unreal and Unity, I believe. It may not work in those. I haven't played really around with HDAs inside of there, so I know terrain can be a little wonky inside of those game engines, but it should work in everything else. If you have anything that you would like to see added, I'll take a look into it and see if I can add that onto the HDA and see if we can get that updated and added in. So there will be a link in the description right at the front to go and download this. So feel free to go and download it and use it for all your projects. Like I said, it is going to require a Houdini engine license. So just make sure that you have at least Houdini Indie, because the Apprentice version will not allow you to use HDAs because it doesn't come with a Houdini engine license. So anyways, thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the asset here. And like I said, if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them for me. But otherwise, have a good day.